and this leads me to another best practice, which is that when you encounter pop-ups, then you can always make sure that sometimes you'll have pop-ups that don't have a border like this. Like they may not have a toolbar, they may not have an X on them, but you can always hold down your Alt key and press down the F4, and that's the Windows shortcut to close a window. Okay, even if you're in Windows and you don't have any windows open and press Alt F4, then it's going to ask you, do you want to shut down Windows? So it's a really handy tool, especially if you run across any pop-ups. I don't know of any websites off the top of my head that are going to have any excessive pop-ups. I'm not going to bring one up, but that's just another thing that I want to tell you about. Be sure to utilize keyboard shortcuts, okay? Because keyboard shortcuts can really help you out, especially if you don't see an X button that you trust on a pop-up and you don't want to click on it and it takes you to even worse of a site. Alright, you can always just hold down your Alt key and press F4, and that'll close down a window for you. Alright, and that counts for Windows 7 as well. And the other thing I want to bring up as well is make sure whenever you're dealing with emails, alright, now a lot of times viruses would transmit themselves via email, and this is just part of just being vigilant, alright, because you always have to be vigilant, especially if you want your computer to operate the best that it can all the time. Make sure that you pay attention to what emails you're clicking on and what links that you're downloading or what attachments you're downloading, alright, because as you may already know, there are certain viruses out there that send themselves out via email, and they'll send themselves out to everybody in a specific guest list of a person. I mean, not guest list, but in a contact list of a person. So in other words, it may be somebody that you know who sent you the email, but the thing is, if you don't know, or if it just contains a link or something, or if it says Happy Valentine's Day and it's not Valentine's Day, or you're not expecting a Valentine's Day gift from that person, then don't open it. Or if it just contains a link, don't open it. Or confirm and verify before you actually open up attachments and things from people, even if you know them, okay? Because would you rather have a person say, you didn't open up my attachment yet, or you didn't go to my link yet, or would you rather have to spend hours upon hours removing a bad infection from your computer that didn't have to exist at all? Alright, and once again, of course, your antivirus would normally catch it, but if it didn't, you know, there's no need to test it if you have better sense than to open up the file in the first place. So the other thing I want to go ahead and bring up too, while we're in this best practices section, I'm going to go ahead and talk about really the ultimate way here, or really the best way that I know of to keep machines from being infected. Alright, as we know, there's really no better network and computer security than a well-informed user, okay? Now, some of you out there may have kids, and if you have kids, they're a blessing. Also, they're still kids. So, in other words, you're gonna have kids who are on your computer sometimes. They may not know everything that you know. Alright? There are a lot of infections out there who will spread around just from kids going to game websites, clicking on pop-ups, trying to download games, not knowing that they're going to infect the machine. So how do you stop this, right? If you go to Control Panel, which I already have open down here, you're going to notice that we have an option here for user accounts. And I'm going to show you how to do this in Windows 7 as well. But in Windows, there are two different types of accounts pretty much. You have a basic user and you have a computer administrator. Now, a guest account is a basic user. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up a better way here to show you the differences between a basic user and an administrator on a computer, okay? If we look under groups and we look at our description, you're going to notice that an administrator will have complete and unrestricted access to the computer slash domain. Now, domain, don't worry about that, especially if you're not a technical user. You probably won't know what a domain is. But in our case, all right, we're just focusing on this local machine. And administrators have complete and unrestricted access to the computer and everything within it. So the point I want to bring up here is that programs run with the permissions that the person who executes them has, unless you specify otherwise. So if you have a non-administrative user trying to make administrative changes to a computer running Windows, then guess what? It won't let him make it because the person doesn't have access to sensitive places on the Windows machine. So in other words, alright, if you have an administrative account with a password, then you have non-administrative accounts such as a guest who doesn't have any password at all, who you use for, let's say, other people who come into your house or for your kids. That guest account won't be able to infect the machine unless you run whatever executable as an administrator. If you don't have admin rights, you can't infect that machine. It won't let you because you don't have permissions. So it may be a headache, but for other people, or if you're even unsure about yourself, it's always safest to throttle down your permissions. You know, don't run as an administrator all the time if you don't have to. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and show you. You see we have different groups. Power users aren't going to be used really anymore, and especially in Windows 7 the group is only there for legacy purposes, and really in XP it also mentions here is only for legacy purposes as well. But then we have basic users are prevented from making accidental and intentional system-wide changes. This is the account that you want to give people if you're not sure what they're going to do on your computer, or if you have kids who may possibly infect your computer inadvertently, or teenagers for that matter as well. So let's go back to our user account screen. You'll see here we have the options to change an account. We can create a new account. We can change the way users log on or off. I'm going to go ahead to create an account, and let's just call this account test1. Okay, now you can see we have our two options. We have the option to make this computer administrator, or we have the option to make it a limited account. A limited account in this case means that it's going to be a basic user account, which means that you can see down here, change or remove their password. They can do that. They can change their picture. They can view files you created, and they can share files and documents on the computer. Alright, but they cannot make any changes to the computer that are system changes. They also can install programs. Alright, if a computer gets infected, it's going to attempt to install itself on the different places. In most cases, they're going to be vulnerable places. Alright, in Windows, if the person's a basic limited user, they're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to spread any sort of infection such as the administrator would, because the administrator has access to everything, but basic users do not. They can't even install their own programs. Alright, I can't say that enough. But if you create a basic limited user, then here you go. You're going to have another account there. Now when you reboot your computer, you're going to see that it's available. You can always set a password on here if you like. If I click on it, then we get our option to create a password. We can change the picture. We can change the account type, and it's going to let me change the account type since I'm currently an administrator on this computer. But if you weren't, then you would not be able to change the account type. Alright, and you can change the name. I can change it from say test1 to test2. Alright, but of course the practical application of this is that if you have someone who has kids, or who has someone that cannot be trusted, who may get a computer infected, give that person a non-admin account, a non-administrator account, and that will stop them from causing those infections. Or like I said, if you just don't want to have to worry about it as well, remember, if you operate in a non-administrative account and maybe run as an administrator as needed, If you hold down, you'll notice here, alright, you have your normal options. If you right click on an icon, you get the option to run as. And the purpose of run as is that you can run an application as yourself, or you can run an application as someone else. Now, if you really need admin rights when you're in a non-administrative account, you can always run the program that you need as an administrator. You can come in here, you can specify the username as administrator, you can type in the password, and you can run that program as an administrator and bypass the hassles of having to run it as a plain user. So as I mentioned before, once again, this is really the best way to keep your machine clean. If you put a good antivirus on there, if you set Windows to update at a specific time, and you keep your administrator account password protected with a good password, and you don't really have to have a password on your plain user accounts. As I mentioned before, plain users can't really make that much of a difference on a computer. So it's always good to make sure that you limit those who have access to the administrator account on your computer. And doing so will create many more stressless days on your computer than stressful days, alright? So those are the best practices for operating a computer that has Windows XP. If you follow those, then you won't have to worry about 99% of those viruses you would normally catch. As I mentioned before, use Alt F4 to close down a pop-up. If you can't close down the pop-up that way, sometimes you'll have a message that comes up that says press OK to stay on the page, press cancel to leave the page, or vice versa. They'll try to mix you up on those pop-up sites when you try to exit out sometimes. And just read the message, don't worry. Remember that if you have a good antivirus program on there, even if it does try to slip in an executable on your computer, then Avast will stop it for you. Most 9 out of 10 cases there. So, and even if it does slip through, you have your tools available as well, and you know how to use your tools. So if you do catch a virus, or if you do catch some malware, you can always come through here and you can always clean out your computer in a really quick time frame. So with these in mind, you can go forth, surf with confidence. Of course, make sure you avoid any known malicious sites, but knowledge is power, and the more knowledge you have, the better off you'll be as far as operating your computer in the most efficient way possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and end out this section. Hope you learned a lot. We're gonna come back with some extra information here. Just gonna go ahead and wrap up this section. Always remember the following key points. Alright, these are really vital, and even though I went over them before, they're still very necessary. Only run Windows as an administrator when absolutely necessary. Always keep Windows updated. Make sure that you have a good antivirus software installed at all times. Make sure that your antivirus is updated as frequently as possible. Beware of suspicious emails, even from friends. Don't freak out if you catch something. Just use the tools demonstrated earlier. Have faith in yourself.